Hello everyone, it's live on air again from Six Senses Waiake e-Learning Centre, and I'm really privileged to have in the studio tonight. I don't know whether we can call it a studio. Sometimes I call it a classroom, sometimes it's a studio, but it's just a Google Hangout, really. I'm really privileged to have both Stuart Macadam, who's the CEO of Cinemaddicts, and Matthew Mawkes, who's a filmmaker from Wellington. And our big theme tonight is on discussing how we make and how we market movies in New Zealand. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over first of all to Matthew, and I'd be interested to know, Matthew, what does it take to make a movie? But before we do that, maybe you'd just better introduce yourself and tell us a few things about your background.
Yeah, hi, hey everyone. Yeah, I'm Matthew Mawkes. I would firstly just start by saying I would call myself very much an aspiring filmmaker. I'm not established. I'm not don't do it full time. Not able to. Would like to, but I think what it takes most of all is perseverance. Actually, I think sticking in with this over what can be many years to make one film, let alone getting yourself established as a filmmaker. So I think perseverance might be the key to it. And I first went to film school way back in 2000, and since then I've made 3 short films, and I'm now working on my first feature film, which I co-wrote, going to be producing. So we're in fundraising mode at the moment. We managed to squeeze some money out of the New Zealand Film Commission, just a little bit, which was fantastic. It enabled us to shoot a really good trailer and so a good 5 minutes of the film. So that was through their fund, which is called Premier Pathways. It's kind of a new thing they do. So we were really excited about shooting this first feature film of mine next year, probably closer to the end of next year. So what is that? Film school in 2000, now it's 2015. I'll be doing my first feature in 2016. So that's, I guess, kind of my take on it anyway, is perseverance might be the thing that divides filmmakers from people who sort of find themselves doing some other kind of craft or business.
Right. Got a few possibilities for asking some questions about that in a few minutes, Matthew. Just turning over to Stuart. Stuart, you've introduced yourself and live on air before, but there'll be a new audience watching tonight. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and Cinemaddicts.
Yeah, sure, David. So I'm Stuart. I'm the founder and CEO of cinemaddicts.co.nz. It's a movies website, so we do movie reviews. We do news on everything movie related. We've got trailers, we've got competitions, we've got almost everything you could ask for movie related. We launched on Queen's birthday weekend last year, and so far it's been a very successful ride. We've received fantastic feedback from everybody that we've worked with, both from a filmmaking and I guess filmmaker perspective. And we're looking to currently, broaden our horizons a bit more. We get about 1,000 to 1,500 visitors every week, and hoping to get that past 5,000 by the end of next year.
Right. And I should say that Stuart is a member of the congregation at Trinity at Waiake, and I've sort of I'm under his wing learning how to market on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. But just at present, YouTube is sort of my speciality. So I wouldn't say I'm a step ahead of Stuart in the marketing of things on YouTube, but maybe a fraction of a step ahead. So really tonight I wanted to start talking about some of the creativity that goes on in making movies and also marketing, because it seems to me that both are essentially steps that have to be undertaken with a great deal of commitment. So let's just tease into the subject Matthew, where do you start with a movie? Is it a
Yeah.
visual thing or is it a written thing? Just tell us what you make of the creative process.
Well, I can tell you what it is for me. It's maybe an idea or a character, and it could just be quite small, or it could be maybe a good ending to a movie, but it's never a full thing. So I sort of sit down and brainstorm, and I co-write all of my scripts now. So I have another person to bounce ideas off, and we found basically with my current project, we just were sitting on my co-writer Mark's balcony one day, and we were just thinking of ideas, and I had a character and he had a character, and then they sort of met in the middle, and then we developed the idea from there. Yeah, but it can be anything and everything, actually. Sometimes I watch a movie and I think, damn, I wish I thought of that. Or I might watch, some old classic film, and I just see a little something that I think, yeah, that's really cool, and it sparks ideas in my head. So that's sort of where I begin.
And what about in terms of trying to market a movie, Stuart? Where does the marketing thing start for you? Is it in terms of doing a written review, or is it in terms, once you've sat down and watched the movie, how do you start to promote a movie?
Well, I think it's multifaceted because it depends on whereabouts you are in the marketing process. A lot of successful film companies wouldn't be anywhere where they are today if they didn't have a lot of media contacts to come and have a look at the film and give their opinion on it. If you're directly involved in the marketing of the film, I think one of the best avenues you can start on, particularly if you're an up-and-coming filmmaker, is to go and have a look at films that have been successful, like the Blair Witch Project. One of the recent ones I saw was the Xenale Gang, and they just used a bit of common sense and just tapped on a lot of contacts, knocked on a lot of doors, and as a result they got a great response. So I think it depends where you are. To me, if you're directly involved in the marketing, it begins the moment the script is finished and filming is about to start. And if you're reviewing it or giving the film publicity as a third party, then it sort of begins as soon as the release date starts building up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I completely agree. In fact, I think sometimes there's value in doing a bit of market research and actually shopping ideas around and seeing what actually is popular. And I don't think we do that enough in New Zealand, actually. Sometimes just the script is commissioned, so to speak, and then it goes to the next stage. And so it's lots of research is a very wise idea. And I think the Xenale Gangs are that's a lovely film. So I really admire those guys going out there and doing that.
When you did your first one, Matthew, did you say that was back in 2006?
My first short film I made, I made a film, an awful, pretentious, horrible pile of crap when I was in film school, but I think every film school student does. Anyway, my first proper short film was in 2001. So yeah, that's quite a while ago now, and great experience just jumping in the deep end, basically. However, I didn't do any of that very important first process, thinking about your audience more, thinking about how you're going to market it, how you're going to get it out there. I just jumped in the deep end and made a film. So I think there's value in that as well. And probably most filmmakers wouldn't show their first short films, many people. Looking back, I think it was pretty good, but the second one was better, and you go from there.
Do you see similarities between writing a script and, say, an author writing a book, or are they different kinds of creative process?
I think writing a screenplay is a lot harder than writing a book. I'm just going to say that. I think you have to think very differently. You have to think about your characters, and you have to show them in action. So you reveal bits of information about your characters by seeing them in action. And I think that's actually it's a lot harder. I think that, a novelist you can just go into the mind of your character, and it's sort of a whole different kettle of fish. Yeah, so writing a screenplay it's tricky, and then you've got things like dialogue, and it's really hard to write good, realistic dialogue. So there's all sorts of elements that make it, I think, really, really tough. I don't think many people can do it, actually, and certainly a lot of novelists can't and shouldn't.
Yeah, a lot of novels sort of get written by movie scriptwriters, don't they? The people have specialised in, have learned that particular creative art. Stuart, you've written a book on motivation recently. I think that was, I can't remember whether you told me when it was published. Been out for a little bit, and at the same time, you're involved in this sort of the whole gamut of marketing. So, from your perspective, do you write your books with the audience in mind, like Matthew alluded to?
I think you have to, and I also add on like what Matthew says as well. He's certainly very right, because when you're writing a screenplay, it's not just, I guess, the characters, and you've got to think of cinematography, you've got to think of lighting, you've got to think of music, you've got to incorporate all those things in, and you've also got a very limited amount of time to effectively tell the story. Whilst in books, they can stretch on for quite a reasonable amount of time, and often explained in great detail, whereas in films you've got to be into the action straight away. As far as writing it for the audience, yes, I think you have to. If the audience doesn't understand the book, then it's going to be very difficult to get people to not only read it, but also, I guess, appreciate it like you do, because you've put a lot of time into it, and I think the worst thing you can do is give a book which is 99% finished and still got a few things that are uncertain. So I think if people can read it and understand it, I mean, it's the best thing ever. I think it was Ernest Hemingway that said, his books are so easy to read because they were so hard to write, and I think that applies quite well to any sort of writing.
Yeah, any comments on that from a filmmaker's perspective?
Oh no, I don't really have too much to add. I just, I'm in complete agreement. And Stuart's absolutely right about editing. You have to. It's really tough. You have to, if you're writing anything, a screenplay, novel, whatever it might happen to be. I think you have to be willing to take criticism, and that's hard to do sometimes. I think certainly in terms of the movie script, it is a blueprint for the film, and you have to just go to the school of hard knocks and get used to being criticized, and hopefully constructively, so you can improve your work. And that's actually honestly why I have found co-writing. Screenplays often get co-written actually, but books and novels are very different. But when you've got someone else in the room who's constantly there to say, no, that's not a good idea, it's really rather helpful.
Does that also apply to, I'd use the word storyboard, like, you've got some content written down, and then you're thinking about the visual images. Do you use that word storyboard at all, or do you know what I'm sort of getting at there? That somehow to get from the written to the visual is a really difficult step.
Yeah, it is. That's the director's job, of course, on a movie. Storyboards, I find they're very useful for the director. They're really good to help him or her plan out the film, but nobody else looks at storyboards apart from the director. I always find, you take these beautifully drawn things to the set, and even the director of photography won't even pay any attention to it. So it's a really good tool for the director and for his or her process. So you have to turn this story into shots, and it's very likely that if the director's had a hand in coding, they might very well have it running through their heads already. But you do what's called a shooting script, and basically that's breaking it down into shots every director does it completely differently. Some walk on set without knowing where the camera is going to be placed. Others will know exactly how many shots and how long they're going to be. It all right down to the finest detail. So it kind of varies, I think.
Did the process get easier for you as you did more movies?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You go in on your first day on a film and you don't know anything really. It's by making the film that you learn. So I think it's really important for filmmakers just to get out there and do this and to become more confident. Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot to be said for experience, and the one thing I have learned is expect something to go disastrously wrong each and every day, because something always does. As a producer now, I just wait for it. I just sit back and just wait for the disaster to start rolling, and then it's sort of my job to sort them out. And I could tell you some interesting stories, but yeah, there's always a lot to deal with on a film set, and hopefully, at least for the director, they don't notice the dramas. If you can just get them to work with the actors, put the camera where it needs to be, really create the movie and have fun with it, then it's up to people like me behind the scenes to be dealing with all that other stuff.
Okay, and Stuart, from your perspective, would it be helpful for someone who's involved in the marketing of the, like Cinema Addicts, if you want to market New Zealand-made films, do you need contact with people like Matthew so that you're sort of aware of the project, not from the start, but from the start of making the movie?
Yeah, it certainly helps. I think if you know filmmakers, and I mean, I think if you do have like a movie reviews website or your entertainment editor at a newspaper or magazine, you're naturally going to start meeting a lot of people who work within the industry, and hearing about their journey from the start. Although even if you don't like the film or you love the film, you really can appreciate the whole process which goes into making the film, particularly with films that are made on very limited budgets. I have one friend whose film just got accepted into its first film festival, and it got rejected about 25 times before he finally got accepted. So I think when you consider as well, he put 7 years of his life into the project itself. When you hear that story, I think that's what connects people with movies quite a lot. So that even if they don't personally have an interest in the film itself or don't enjoy watching it, they can come out saying, wow, that's 7 years of hard work that this person has put into a film.
That's a fascinating observation, because it seems to me, I mean, most of my creative energies have been involved in producing theological content, but not necessarily just for a written audience. It's always seemed to me just as important. Theology is kind of like a performance, and sometimes it can be a tantrum of a performance, sometimes it could be a much better performance. But this, in both your answers, what you're alluding to, particularly the guy that had the rejection, from numerous film festivals and so on, it seems to me that particularly in theology, one is constantly facing the world of rejection, and in quite a harsh way, because the church has always had these sort of normative rules that you have to subscribe to a particular set of beliefs. You have to recite creeds and all of this kind of thing, and it's really hard for someone with a personal, a genuine personal spiritual insight, creativity, to be able to get that out there into Christian performance, if you like, without it going through a kind of school of hard knocks. So my perspective, and I think it's certainly to be the case with people like Stuart Mannins and George Armstrong and so on, we produce content, not necessarily films or books, but content that could be sometimes a little bit of film, sometimes a little bit of book, sometimes a little bit of music, and it has to make its way in the world. Now, both of you are sort of, I wouldn't say starting out necessarily, but both of you have some years to go in terms of seeing how your ideas play out in the longer span of time rather. So Matthew, you've been in it long enough to move from let's make a film to this new kind of role, but do you still ever get this sort of basic urge, gee, I'd really like to make a film again? And
yeah, of course. And be working on a low budget is great because there's nothing to stop you really. I mean, that my first feature is going to have a very low budget. It's only $200,000. Just saying that sounds like huge, but as soon as you start breaking down what you're spending it on, all the money's gone, and you're just working on the smell of an oily rag. And it's years and years and years of work. And Stuart's absolutely right, you know. And then what's worse is that you make the film and some critic writes it off in one sentence. So you just have to get used to the school of hard knocks because it's kind of what movie making is all about, I suppose. I just find for most filmmakers I know, all they want to do is make another movie. So if the film does well, if it gets a short film, for example, gets into a festival and you get a big boost of energy and enthusiasm for the next project, and every filmmaker I know, they're just living for the next movie. And I think that applies to really established directors and producers as well. You know, I've just directed, you know, Interstellar, but I can guarantee that Christopher Nolan's actually probably thinking about the next movie. It's like, oh, great, I get to make another one. And a flop is, of course, just around the corner.
Yeah, that's very, very true. You never know how the next project's going to turn out, even though you're looking forward to it. That's exactly right.
I don't know if I your question, David.
No, but what you did answer was something that I remember once I put together what I thought was a fantastic sermon, one of the best ever that I'd done. This is when I was living in Wellington, Matthew, and I was invited down to preach at Wesley Wellington, very famous pulpit that I should add, and I wrote this song, I wrote this sermon about a song by Procol Harum, White a Shade of Pale, because it was based on a theme of Johann Sebastian Bach. And I put together this fantastic sermon, and I got down and preached the thing, and lo and behold, there was a lady who worked in a nightclub that was then across the road from Wesley Wellington, and my sermon happened to sort of touch on, you know, ladies of the night and that kind of thing, maybe not in a particularly positive way. And all of a sudden she got up and started calling out, you know, that's a lot of crap, David. All words to that effect. And the same is true, you know, there have been a number of times that I've been preaching and people have walked out in protest. And, you know, it's sort of like it's immediate. It's a little bit like live comedy, isn't it? You know, no one laughs and you're in real trouble. So I think there's something about the creative process that says no matter how good you think you are, it's not necessarily going to always hit the sweet spot in the way that you hope. And that kind of leads into the first question. I'm just going to select Barbara Moller's question. And if folk are watching and they want to ask a question, I see we've got a few viewers here, you need to toggle around. There's a little matrix of 9 dots, and if you toggle that, it's a toggle switch. you can ask a question in that question pod. So Barbara's question is this, and I'll direct this at Matthew first of all. Can you tell us, Matthew, approximately how many Christian groups in New Zealand are involved in making Christian movies?
No, I can't answer that question. I'm afraid is my answer. Unless you join David's church, it sounds like there's some interesting things happening there. But we were discussing before we went on air about some of the evangelical churches, and I think that they are very interested in media and any kinds of endeavours that tell Christian stories through modern media, and they tend to have quite young congregations too. So I think I'm just making a guess. I do know from people I've met that there are groups out there like Elim, I think, are very involved in their own style of filmmaking. But I'm afraid I couldn't give you a definitive answer about that one.
That just raises a sort of slight side issue for me, Matthew. You make movies. Have you ever considered making, I'm not sure what the equivalent for a short one-off for TV would be, but do you see your medium as being movies that are shown in a movie theatre, or do you also look at TV as a possibility?
I would look at absolutely anything, actually, David. I've got my own projects that I do, but tonight I'm actually working on a short film for another director. I'm just a production assistant, so any opportunity I get just to be on set, I thoroughly enjoy and always want to help out. I guess there's an element of networking as well, and when you're in a town like Wellington, you often sort of bump into many crew members and have worked with before, so it's quite fun too. Yeah, so any opportunity that comes along. Maybe not advertising. I'm not into that, but I think it's probably because I've got a big project on the horizon for myself right now. But if someone was going to offer me money, I probably wouldn't turn it down.
Well, Matthew, you and I were also discussing before we came on here the fact that YouTube itself has turned into something different that now also offers another kind of alternative in marketing your creative input. You use the example of our famous New Zealand singer, Lord. Would she have got anywhere without YouTube?
Lord, no, probably not. It's interesting. It can be a platform. I think for filmmakers like me who are still working on very low budgets, it's essential, absolutely essential, as is all forms of social media. Any way that you can connect to an audience without spending money is a good thing. Yeah.
Well, Stuart, you yourself are looking at expanding out Cinema Addicts to include TV reviews. I think we touched on that last time. Would you actually look at doing YouTube reviews? Because YouTube has become such big business. I was saying before we began the broadcast that Oprah Winfrey has started a program on spiritual experience looking at all the religions around the world, Christianity, Islam, Hindu, etc. And that's being marketed through YouTube. So you got any comments about that, Stuart?
Yeah, I suppose you could never really close the door on what you do and don't review. I mean, cinema can be quite a wide thing if you take it into a broader context. And I think as well, yeah, I mean, YouTube videos is becoming a very big phenomenon. In fact, I can even remember typing in the other day, keeping up with, because my friend's a big fan of keeping up with the Kardashians for some ghastly reason. And I saw this spin-off of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't know if it's called Keeping Up with the Joneses or whatever it was, but it was this genuine spin-off, and it had hundreds and thousands of views. So I think when it comes to getting out there, never close the door on it, because, I actually see a lot of future movies, feature-length films as well, being funded by groups such as Netflix, YouTube, and a lot of other streaming sites which have access and full rights to the films.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're moving through, and I'd like to ask both of you a quite specific sort of set of questions now, and that is, I'll just bring up my screen share just so people can see. And the question really is, are there any lessons that the church could learn from the creative processes of making and marketing movies? In other words, what could be directly applied from the creative processes that you guys are involved with into personal spirituality or anything to do with church? Because it does seem to me that if you, whether it's marketing movies or making movies or however we move, there are some incredibly creative processes that go on. How would you guys, what would you say to the Christian churches about doing something about using creative process?
I can probably speak to the making movie side of it. I think what I try to do, David, is always have a crew of people who are very positive. For one, I think it's really important to surround yourself with positive energy when you are in a very stressful kind of scenario, which certainly being on a film set is a very positive environment. And there's a great deal of conflict management you have to do as well. There's also a real strong element of taking care of each other. You know, I'm often find myself looking out for people who are desperately in need of water or coffee or something like that. Just little things. Your cast, especially, they're very, very vulnerable. As soon as the director calls cut, they've got nobody except him or her, and they sort of just look at them and wait for approval. So I think you have to look after each other on a film set. I think there's a big element of that, and I think in the business side of movies, there's a lot of people who are just there, and it's all about making money, and it's all about, you know, bums on seats. So there's also a bit of negativity floating around. I think to sort of get through all that, you have to have a certain attitude that is pretty positive, and very optimistic outlook helps too, I think. So I think that's maybe my little take on it anyway.
Yeah, so I guess with my side, like the marketing element, I think a big thing is just, I guess, general outreach. I think that's something where the church has, I think particularly in recent times, fallen behind. Rather than being proactive, it's had to become very reactive in light of a lot of the negative criticism which has been geared towards it. And I think not addressing and confronting those problems has landed it in a very negative light, not just in New Zealand, but in many places of the world which were once Christian. So I think, yeah, putting a positive message on it is always the most important thing, because sometimes the most successful films don't make a lot of money, and sometimes it's the other way around, whereas a really bad film will make a lot of money. So I think you have to be able to combine the two together quite nicely, particularly with a Christian message, because, I mean, I'm of the opinion that, you know, it's got the best possible way of life, and it's been shown through the centuries. All the countries which have adopted Christianity have benefited enormously from its freedoms. So yeah, I think touching on that would certainly be an important thing, and just showing people that you're putting your money where your mouth is, because a lot of the time, you know, Christians, and, you know, I'm certainly guilty of it sometimes as well, it can be quite hypocritical, and I think that's something which should be addressed and worked on.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective on the marketing side there, and I'd like to comment on that. Just before I do, Stuart Macadam has asked a question, but only I think the only thing that's come through is one one letter in the question. So Stuart, you might need to go back and retype that question. But I'd like to come back to something that's Stuart Macadam said. Stuart's right. Stuart Macadam said that it is important to be positive about the Christian message, and that seemed to echo what Matthew was saying about the need to surround oneself with positive people when you're making a movie, because of the stressful nature of being on the set and production costs and time, and yeah, a whole lot of potentially short fuses in there. Oh, yeah. And I, just listening to you two guys, I really wonder whether what we've got emerging in the church is something that is, can I put it this way, under-rehearsed, not well written enough. That if you're going to make a movie, your actors, they can be, certainly need to be spontaneous, but and fresh, but they also need to be extremely well rehearsed. And that's true also, I think, with what Stuart Macadam was saying in terms of his book about marketing for a positive attitude, for positive engagement. People have to be motivated to want to do something well for the spiritual journey. You've got to be motivated to make a movie. You've got to be motivated to write a book. You've got to be motivated to act out a sermon. I think what we are perhaps a little bit lacking in Christianity is helping congregations and helping people that are sort of on the fringes to realize that they have a performance part as well to play. So when I go off to see a movie, I'll get you as one of the final things we do, Stuart, to talk about the movie Everest. But when I went off to see I think it was called The North Face of the Eiger, it came out a couple of years ago. My wife and I saw it down in Oamaru in a tiny little theatre, and my goodness, we were sitting on the edge of we were participating in every last move of the pickaxe, etc. There was something, and it's so hard to get that same feeling when you're sitting in a pew in a church. Yeah, you go into the movies with an air of expectation. I'm just going to flick up Stuart's question. If you guys could listen to us and, to the question, and then if each of you responds, Stuart says he's interested in the implication of responding to informed criticism. Now he's given a whole lot of other stuff in there as well, but to what extent are some artists lone workers and on the other hand co-workers? So yeah, informed criticism, I think that was your comment, Matthew. Yeah. But do you see yourself as a lone worker or co-worker or a bit of both?
Co-worker, very much so, yeah. And I probably didn't always used to think like that. I used to write alone, and to be honest, it's only when I started co-writing that I felt that I became better, you know. Yeah, so that was my experience. There are some great writer-directors out there, but I think New Zealand could probably do with a bit more of this tradition, which is a little bit, well, I suppose Hollywood actually, but I think there's a reason that movie scripts are often co-written, is because there's something about the script that two minds or even three are probably just better than one sometimes. And making a film is all about co-working, of course. So that's certainly been my experience. Informed criticism, I think, is so important. You just got to get your script read by experienced people, and we've been very lucky to have our current script read by some really, we've had a few pretty well-known filmmakers have been giving us some fantastic feedback. So I think it's important just to be open to that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
over to
from
you,
my
Stuart.
side, I find that, of course, with the work that I do, particularly in marketing, it's always, I mean, when I work with filmmakers to promote their work, so every single time, I get an idea, I like to bounce it off them. Sometimes, if it's a really big decision and has quite a big budget, I'll say, okay, sure, let's have a look at this idea and discuss the pros and cons about it. Sometimes, if I'm given the creative freedom, I'll just go and do the idea anyway and let them know afterwards. But as far as I guess with Cinema Addicts going, yeah, a lot of the work I do in promoting that is sort of like the lone wolf. Not done out of choice, but more because I find it's a more effective way of getting things done than constantly talking with the other co-owners that I have in the website as well. They normally just leave that stuff to me, which I'm quite content with.
Uh, that's a really interesting point that both of you have made that at times we do have to be working in a community, co-working, and at times we do have to take sort of some individual actions for ourselves. But I'm very much inclined to what you were both saying about the need for feeling that you belong to a wider group. This came out quite strongly in Matthew Mawkes' understanding of the filmmaking community in Wellington. So you're getting lots of input from, but you're also doing lots of different jobs in it. And that's absolutely true of Stuart Macadam as well, because he's doing lots of different things, not just running his website, but writing books, etc., etc. So I really think that if we were looking for an answer to Stuart's question, it comes from there, Stuart, that essentially all of those things, informed criticism, being a lone artist, working with people in community, all of us are doing that all the time, striving to get something out there that will entertain people, that will make people laugh, cry, feel for our projects, be they related to the church, be they related to the secular community. So I think it's a great question, Stuart, and I'm very grateful for the two answers from Matthew and Stuart Macadam. And I see we've reached the time of 7:42. That's only about a minute and a half away from when we'd normally bring this to a close. So just a brief word from each of you. Have you enjoyed the experience of being live on air tonight? Is this something that you could see yourself doing again in 3 months' time? Not necessarily together, but with other panelists as we look at a whole range of things coming up. So you can give honest feedback if you say, nah, thumbs down, David, that's okay by me too. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I get a real buzz out of working with Stuart Macadam. How about you, Matthew?
Oh, it's been awesome, David. I'd be very happy to do it again. And Stuart, great work. Awesome to see it. I completely agreed with the lone wolf thing too. Sometimes you just have to do things by yourself and not wait to be turned down by somebody else. So, green light yourself, so to speak. I'm totally on board with that as well. But it's been a really enjoyable process. It's fun.
Yeah, I always enjoy these conversations. They definitely, I think, bring out your ability to, I guess, communicate what you know about film making and film marketing in this regard. So yeah, definitely, and it's always good to see another New Zealand filmmaker, Matthew, and I cannot wait to go and see a film at the cinema, and if need be, I'll fly down to Wellington to see it myself.
Oh, don't worry. When we finally make this thing, believe me, I will be plugging it to within an inch of its life and annoying everyone I possibly can, including you.
Well, what we'll do,
Well, it's the
we'll
best
create a
method to
special.
take. I think the more people you can reach out to, the better.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. When it's done, Matthew, you can have a whole hour for live on air. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. We'll leave the call at this point. Thanks for watching, everyone else.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.